Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, even brothers and sisters, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent, I welcome you to this second annual G20 Interfaith Summit. Thank you so much for being part of this. I think we all feel inspired and even given some clear direction on how our deliberations should take place over the next few days. Now, I'd like to introduce our final keynote speaker this evening, Mr. Tim Wilson. He's Australia's Human Rights Commissioner. His focus is particularly on liberal individual human rights, including religious freedom, free speech and association, equality before the law, and property rights. Now, this is a bit of perhaps qualification for him being here, but I'd like to highlight perhaps the most pertinent reason why we would invite someone of Tim Wilson's stature to come and speak with us and be with us, is he has a unique opportunity that many human rights commissioners haven't recognized, haven't seized, or perhaps hadn't had the opportunity to institute. And he's leading a national dialogue in Australia on the role of religion in Australian society. And what this means isn't simply an opportunity to come together and speak and have your say and go home and talk about, oh, hey, look what I got to do today. But it's really an opportunity to shape the future of an entire nation, to help people begin to reach across some of the divides and learn from one another, but express themselves and make it clear that what they have to offer can lead to a better and brighter Australian future. Now, he also has a great responsibility in this work, and so I would like you to join with me in welcoming him to the podium, but also in encouraging him in this great work that he has to do. Tim.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and to every distinguished guest who is in the room, particularly to you, Ambassador Saperstein, for that excellent address. I have the challenge, of course, of dealing with the complex issues around religious freedom across my great country. You have the challenge across the world. My job seems somewhat easier after tonight. But it isn't an easy task, because everybody who cares about religious freedom and its importance and its connection to people's sense of individual identity, the work we need to do goes on. And that's why it is a great pleasure and an honour to be here and topical to speak about the importance of one of the most central of all human rights, which is about the fundamental freedom of religious liberty. It comes, of course, at a time of great stress as people are using acts of violence justified in their interpretation of faith to commit heinous acts. But it's also an important opportunity and a reminder for everybody of the important role that religion plays in advancing charity, the provision of services, and the guidance of people's spiritual plane. Religious freedom is central to freedom itself. Without the preservation of freedom of conscience, speech, assembly, and association, people of faith, on the basis of their faith, cannot be seeking to preserve their own individual liberty and contributing towards their own society. Recently, in a speech to a meeting at the Australian Human Rights Commission, our Attorney General, the Honourable George Brandis QC, made the remark that is often not appreciated, particularly in our Western liberal tradition, that modern notions of political liberty had their origins largely in the struggles for religious liberty. That is particularly to be seen in the upheavals of the 17th and 18th centuries on both sides of the Atlantic. John Milton's Areopagitica, published at the height of the English Civil War and long admired as a seminal statement on the case for freedom of the press, was Milton's protest against the censorship of the publication of his views about divorce, which was one of the great controversies, religious controversies of the time. John Locke's letter concerning toleration, published some 45 years later in 1689, which was rightly seen as a powerful avowal of the principle of freedom of speech, was of course a plea for religious tolerance as well. Sometimes we need to look back to face contemporary challenges. But these moments can define us. Those of us with different beliefs need to be active partners in reshaping the conversation about religious freedom if it is to be preserved into the 21st century. True pluralism requires respecting the importance of religion in a multi-faith society. The challenge is how we go about that. First, we need to reassert the importance of religious freedom as part of the international human rights discussion. Second, those with belief need to step up and recognise that if they want others to respect their religious freedom, then they need to respect the rights and freedoms of others. Third, there needs to be a trust-based conversation all across our world, within nations, between peoples, focused on engagement to discuss the issues that face religious freedom and how we can take these issues forward. And that is the purpose of this conference. The challenges facing religious freedom cannot be confined simply to domestic affairs. When religion is threatened somewhere, it is ultimately threatened everywhere. Whether it is in Vietnam, where their government has failed to provide proper respect for religious association and assembly without governmental approval. In many countries where practicing Christianity is and remains a punishable crime. Or even in countries that should have a better record, such as my own, where we have long-running debates about whether Muslims should be able to develop houses of worship. One of the great challenges faced in truly pluralistic societies is social cohesion in an age of individuality and individual identity. Often people wrongly conclude that the solution is to suppress individuality in favour of collective aspirations or culture. The challenges posed by the frontiers of religious freedom are the same for freedom generally. Such an approach is wrong-headed to suppress individuality. Social cohesion is not preserved through suppressing liberty. Social cohesion is preserved by providing liberty and for people to be able to express their individuality and to hold a mirror up to themselves and to society. Suppression will only ever lead to outbursts. Lawful expression leads to dialogue, discussion, and debate. The power and influence of religion is above debate, both theologically or from the perspective of public policy. The important tenet is to have a conversation that is properly anchored in a respect for our common humanity and a tolerance of difference. And that is what law and society should seek to respect and enlarge. Secularism should leave the state neutral in the affairs of free people who respect the law. It shouldn't seek to direct how people live their lawful lives. Because when a society is diverse, the more it anchors itself, it needs to be anchored necessarily to preserve social cohesion. Without it, we see the full spurn of derision, persecution and violence because of people against people, because of who they are, what they believe, and how they can lawfully practice. Societies will continue to progress if people are given the freedom to do so. Attempts to forcefully preserve the status quo will always be unsuccessful. What can be preserved are institutions and the guiding influence that they provide. But the critical word there is influence. Other sources of authority also emerge. The main challenge for authorities to remain influential is to be relevant and not to withhold cultural change that has gained acceptance. This challenge is no greater than an era of constant change. Religious freedom can play a vital role in supporting economic development by motivating the charity needed to cover the gap between the government and the marketplace to make society just. That sense of justice requires us to protect a fairness that invests everybody in the preservation of the best strengths of our own individual societies. Respect for religious freedom is equally central for people being able to reach their own individual potential that spurns on their full contribution to their society. Precisely because of the reasons that Ambassador Saperstein went through, religion has a relationship to sustainable economic development. But, of course, there are many challenges. Technology, global travel, and the interconnectedness of people is an incredible boon, but it can also facilitate great threats when it is used for ill. The solution to these threats is not to kowtow. It is to refine the confidence and purpose of pluralistic societies and of our different belief systems that focus on our common humanity. That applies in the realm of policy inside and outside our countries. In my countries, tensions don't just arise between faith traditions, but also between attitudes of faith communities and the pursuit of social and cultural reforms to increase the full participation and dignity of everybody, whether it's on the basis of gender or on the basis of sexual orientation or other attributes that are central to people's individual identity. The way to navigate our way through these pursuits is to bring people together, to have dialogue, and to have a proper, respectful discussion. We've done so by bringing together a National Religious Freedom Roundtable to start that dialogue, and there will be many more to come. Because interfaith dialogue is important. It builds relationships that exceeds the quotes in newspapers and television programs between different warring factions. Instead, dialogue has the capacity to engage people in the challenges that face the other challenges of pluralism, going beyond just issues of faith. It's through dialogue that we resolve these issues, not through conflict. It's the only way to ensure that your concerns in the development of law and policy are reflected at all stages of discussion. If religion is an important part of people's public life, then proper respect also needs to be expected to the rights and the freedoms of others. Whether it's in the reform of workplace laws, national security legislation, and the enlargement and limitations on religious freedom itself. The future of religious freedom squarely sits with those people of faith and the tone that they set. Only when people respect the rights of others do we advance and respect the rights of everybody. Thank you.